I can click all 10 boxes.
I remember this distinctly. The judge hit the gavel and we walked out of the courtroom and everyone was celebrating. And I was devastated. And it was truly sad because this was not, to me, a victory. My abuser was my father. This was someone that I loved, someone that I had a relationship with, who, yes, was doing terrible things, but at the same time, it's a very complicated world.
I grew up in a home where we were constantly told, you do not talk about what goes on in this family outside of this house.
Every type of child abuse, whether it be verbal, physical, sexual, can really affect the child in numerous ways, from brain development to social relationships, to the way they interact in their environment or don't interact.
I felt like I really didn't have much to be happy about.
So when a child is living in this state of tension, okay, I like to describe it as they have this constant alarm clock going off in their head. We often hear the saying, well, Colin, he went from 0 to 100 like that. I don't know why he pushed Kennedy down. I'm going to challenge that, and we're looking with a trauma lens. Colin was already at a 60. He's constantly having his alarm clock go off.
And it's very common for people who have experienced ACEs in their childhoods to try to minimize those and try to convince themselves that it wasn't really as bad as it was.
Timing is really important. The sooner that these kiddos are allowed to address and are willing to address the trauma, the sooner the healing process can begin.
I really didn't allow myself to understand and think about the complexities. So I went through the gamut of getting sick all the time and low immune system and maybe making poor choices. All of these things are because if you're not given the opportunity to heal and your body is holding on to something, it's going to find a way to let it out.
It is okay to have difficulties. It's expected, and it's okay to be where you're at and to allow others to meet you there.
When I started to see a really incredible trauma-informed therapist, I started to I had a breakthrough.
And I came to a point where I realized that if I smile, just smiling, other people around me will smile as well. And to realize that that helps to get me through my day.
I was able to re-engage with these memories of these things that had happened to me in a way that I was in control. There's also this stigma for survivors that, you know, once you tell your story, people look at you differently, that you're damaged goods. And I am a survivor of sexual abuse, and I can tell you that that doesn't have to be the story.
You know, we may not be able to completely prevent the child abuse or neglect that's going on in a home, but can we step in and can we prevent it from going further? Anybody can have a child and here you go, off, you're on your way, and nobody stops to tell you, hey, you're gonna need a whole lot of help here. The only thing we ever have as a parent to go on is our experiences. So if we grew up in a family that was toxic and stressful, that's what our experience is gonna be. And we don't see them as mistakes, though. We see them as that's the way it is because that's how we grew up.
A survivor of child abuse, Karen Staub, knew she didn't want to make those mistakes.
For me personally, I had to make a very hard decision in continuing to look to my family for support or look outside of my family for support. And I chose to look outside of my family for support. There are a plethora of resources that are out there and to make sure both moms and dads are healthy in their development and healthy in their parenting skills so they can be healthy for the kids.
Northwest Community Action Agency is one resource parents can go for support.
Every program under our umbrella encompasses the 5 protective factors in helping a family.
And those protective factors, they focus on 5 different attributes of a family to make them stronger.
The agency's main program, Early Head Start, for expectant mothers and 0 to 3-year-olds. Specialists make weekly visits, supporting parents in guiding their child's development while helping families meet their goals.
We encourage and let them know from the beginning, you are your child's first teacher. We are here to support you. So even though we're bringing all these materials, it is for the parents' support.
We have to start from the ground up like we're building a house. That foundation from the very bottom needs to be healthy and secure before we can put a roof on.
Mama 5, Tori Oglesby, was part of Head Start when she was a kid. Now her kids are in the program.
I was absolutely terrified when I became a mom for the first time.
But through Head Start, she's found a way to tackling the hardest job someone can have, being a parent.
It's understanding their, understanding their personalities, their emotions, how they're going to handle it, and then being able to step in and shape that with them.
I can't regulate my child if I'm not regulated. So I learned various things along the way of self-regulation, of making sure that I'm calm before I speak.
That's been a really big thing for me, is just getting to be more connected with my kids emotionally.
We'll enroll the child, but the child is only a piece of it, because how the child develops and moves from that point depends on the family.
If they know better, now they have the chance to do better. And that's all that we can do.
And that's what Karen did, built a healthy foundation for her children.
I had to have the discussion with my parents that they would no longer see my children alone. They were angry. There was, I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of threats. There was tremendous threats of violence to me. I can look back and I can say now that I've made the right choices for them in breaking that cycle, so then their children are healthy, and then in the next generation, their children are going to be even healthier.
People talk about sexual abuse prevention, and what they're really talking about is intervention. They're really talking about stopping something that has happened from occurring again.
Primary prevention is looking at those aspects before it happens.
We explore social norms, we explore child equity, and we'd really try to examine the overall system from a macro view, a 30,000-foot view, to figure out, why is this happening in the first place?
Two people are standing by a riverbank and they start to see children floating down a river. And one of them says, we need to get those children out of that river. And the other one says, yes, we definitely do, but what we really need to do is go to the head of the river and find out why they're falling in the first place.
Because if we are able to figure out how this is happening, why it's happening, and then fix it, we're supporting the people who are helping the kids get out of the river. And we're supporting, most importantly, the kids. And yet, this is the hardest thing about primary prevention. It's really, really hard to find funding and to find support for something that may never happen.
And it's really, really difficult because funders or grant holders, they want to see data. They want to see your data from what you've been doing. And you can't produce data from something that hasn't happened yet. Most of the dollars go to programs under tertiary prevention and secondary prevention measures. They're the things where abuse has already occurred, or there's a high likelihood of abuse to occur.
There are so many amazing programs and that are looking for funding from our taxpayer dollars, and I think it's important for the people in our government to be fiscally responsible and make sure that they're spending the money the best way that they can.
So primary prevention is critical, and again, supporting more stable housing. That's been a huge issue for me, which creates such a stress on families when they're worried literally about keeping the roof over their head, access to mental health support for children and adults. there are a lot of things that we can and should be doing more of as a state to just help create the most stable and supportive environment for families and kids.
If we put more funding into this, ultimately, we're going to be saving a lot of money, and we're going to be, most importantly, saving a lot of kids. So it has to be a part of the conversation.
There are people at the state and the federal level making laws and policies and investing money or not investing money into prevention and treatment. And I wanted to be more at the table to advocate directly for those kids and families.
So really just getting in touch with your senators and your legislators and your local commissioners and saying, I believe that this program deserves to be funded.
We've been tempted by funders and tempted by grants to go into secondary prevention and to broaden our focus. If we do that and if we take our attention off of primary prevention, then it's not going to be there for our community, and it needs to be, because we need to continue to have a voice for every child to make sure that we know that we all have a role to play in the healthy development of our children.
So it has to be a part of the conversation, and yet it can't be the only part. We have to remember all three parts have to work together.
Yes, I do. I think it should be talked about a lot more. It needs to come out in the open, and people need to say something about it if they see it or hear it, you know?
I believe it's greater than we think it is.
Do you think it gets talked about enough?
Certainly not.
We should all be talking about it, and because if we're not talking about it, we're not recognizing that it's happening.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says during the pandemic, the total number of emergency visits related to child abuse and neglect decreased. But the percentage of visits ending in hospitalizations increased compared to 2019.
Yeah, reporting goes down doesn't mean that abuse stops. It means that it's now happening and nobody can put eyes on it and nobody can help to stop it.
And right now I think we're relying way too much on the experts, right? The people who are gonna go and do something about it. And they're overwhelmed and overloaded. And you could be the person that makes that difference though.
So how do we all collaborate? How do we use our resources, our education, our passion to really come together and help to change these kids' lives?
Past several years, our council has focused on the message of mentor, advocate, and donate, because that gives everyone something to do.
Heather Goodman, owner of Wildflower Bakery, decided to use her love for baking to give back.
The goal is for them to be shaped as like the little points, with blue and silver around there, and then on a stick of some sort, so it will actually look like a pinwheel.
A percentage of the cookie proceeds will support the Wexford Missaukee Child Protection Council.
I love people. I love serving my community. I love children. I love working with women. That's my heart.
Diana Volant also doing her part, creating the Mindful Performance Therapy Project for kids dealing with trauma.
I developed this program because I realized that talk therapy was just not effective for every child, especially when they have chronic trauma. What the MPT project does is it combines physical fitness as a coping skill alongside therapy in order for these kiddos to develop an emotional insight, emotional recognition, and then to release these emotions through behaviors that are healthy and that they can use inside and outside of therapy.
The CDC says in their research that child abuse and neglect are one of the top causes of mental health for both children and adults. If we're not raising healthy children and families, we're not going to end up with healthy communities. We're not going to end up with healthy, strong businesses. We're not going to end up with a healthy, strong military, nation. I mean, it just keeps rising and rising.
Just people knowing that they have a support system and that as a community, we should build each other up. We should love thy neighbor. That's what helps people to be successful.
So we can all mentor a child or mentor a family. We can all keep our eyes and ears open in our communities to just kind of look and see what's going on around us.
For me, I get to live in the hopeful world that I think if we can all come together and agree that taking care of kids, protecting kids, no matter the costs, is all of our responsibility, then I think that the vision of a world without abuse can happen.